So welcome to the August meeting of the Planning Commission for the Village of Southampton. Today we're going to have a presentation of the proposed sewer map and plan for the Village Center, the Village Business District. So a few years ago we all realized that we had a significant problem with drainage in the Village Center, and we decided that we would approach it in what we thought was the proper planning method, which is we would first do a zoning plan for the Village Center, which we engaged Aaron Krantz, Excellent Q, and I think about two years ago the trustees adopted the revised zoning for the Village Center and the design guidelines. And we wanted to do that first so that when the sewer was made possible in the village, we had proper controls over what could be built. We then went out and looked for a team to work with us to create the sewer map and plan, and I think about 9 months ago. April of last year. Oh my God, it's longer. We brought on H2M, architects and engineers, along with Cameron Engineering and Frau Fritz, to come up with that plan. And about 6 months ago, we had a meeting here where they talked about what they were going to be doing. And there have been several workshops in between to further develop that plan. So this is the first public hearing. It's an opportunity for everyone to give us their comments. And this is something we very much want to go forward with. I think anyone who's been looking at Lake Agawam this summer and seeing what it looks like realizes how urgent it is to do something about drainage in the village. So with that, introduce Frank to get started.
Okay, let's talk sewers. My name is Frank Russo. I'm an engineer with H2M. With me is Nick Bono. Nick is the project manager and prepared a vast amount of the study. David Tepper with Cameron Engineering, and my good friend Mark Wagner. When we interviewed for the project, we prepared a chart, and the chart this is the chart. It's on the village website, still is, has been, hasn't been taken off. But what I want, this is the entire project. I know you can't read this, but this is the entire project from start to end. We got retained to do the first 2 rows of the project. That was the preparation of the map and plan to form the sewer area, and the other portion is the secret portion, State Environmental Quality Review Act compliance. We got retained to do that. We subsequently had a kickoff meeting. We had several workshops, as Paul said, with some of the board of trustees, with certainly the planning commission, and as a result of those meetings, we came up with a plan. What we've completed is we've completed that portion of the map and plan, which really gets it to the point where the board of trustees have to act to forward it onto the state to form a sewered area. And we've completed that much of the secret, and Cameron Engineering will go into where we are and why we're not quite done with that at this point. I just want to commend the planning, the way you guys handled the whole process with doing the zoning, made our job that much easier because we knew exactly how to estimate the flows and where this project was going. So I just want to let you know that. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Nick, and Nick's going to go really point by point of the conclusions and the recommendations of the plan. We will not be reinventing the wheel. All the presentations that were done by our firm and Cameron are all on the website. They're all available for viewing. So there's no, once again, we just want to get right to it. Okay?
And Frank, I just want to mention that after tonight, this particular presentation will also be on the village website. You can read it.
So and picking up from where Frank left off, we prepared a map and plan. So the map aspect of the project was to identify study area, service boundary, and the plan was to identify how we would move forward through completion, providing preliminary conceptual layouts, design criteria, and most importantly, cost and tax implications associated with the project. So those are all the components that are required by law in the map and plan. And before I get into each point that we need to make in the map and plan, I'll just hit you up with the next steps of the project moving forward. So what we're here to do is to go over the plan, and we just need to incorporate comments and finalize that plan to issue it as a final document. Similarly, the SECRA happens in parallel with it to evaluate environmental impacts potential from the project. That would also need to be finalized moving forward. After that, as Frank said, it's a legal submission to the state to form the district, to form a taxable area within the community. After that, there would be an engineering design report would happen concurrently with this to apply for grants and fundings to make it affordable so this project could really happen and become reality. Subsequent would be engineering design documents, advertisement, bid and award, construction, and then startup. And that's a real brief overview of the steps it takes to move one of these projects from its infancy to completion. So as far as the map aspect goes, the overview of the proposed sewer system, again, you can see this proposed sewer district will encompass the entire village as the plan stands currently. There'll be a sewer service area, which is a smaller subset of the village, which focuses on the poorly drained area down here in the business center. It currently consists of 204 tax lots and about 120 acres of area is what the current plan is. The key objective is really to improve the water quality within Lake Agawam. And this is one component that will help improve the quality. There's surface drainage and there are other things that also need to be done for complete, treatment and improvement of the lake. This won't solve the issue, but it will help improve it. So as I said, for the service area, in order to do a conceptual layout design, you have to come up with a capacity, a volume of water that you're going to treat. With that being said, we went through the land use that was provided by the tax assessor, and we used design criteria on existing build-out to come up with a projected design flow for the proposed service area of 130,000 gallons a day. And based on the zoning changes and modifications, the initial build-out would be for a facility to accommodate 200,000 gallons a day of sanitary flow. The type of system, again, that is in the plan is quote-unquote a hybrid collection system. So with sewers, you probably think, okay, it just drains out to my cesspool. If I have a sewer district, it just drains out to a sewer in the road and goes to a treatment plant. In this area, it's a little unique with the build-out, where our goals were to reduce number of pump stations because of the build-out and the locations of existing systems and how plumbing would have to be reconfigured. We wanted to minimize that. We wanted to minimize dewatering. We wanted to minimize traffic impacts during construction and minimize utility relocations. So the hybrid system isn't just gravity sewers, it's multiple grinder pump stations, which aren't big, monstrous structures constructed within the village. They're small stations scattered throughout the village that pump into common mains. So it's a pressurized system that would be pumped and conveyed up to the treatment facility. Again, all these figures are included in the draft map and plan. I know they're hard to see on the slideshow, but they can be viewed on the village website. This figure, again, I apologize, it is hard, but you can see the boundary. It shows sewer routing, pump station locations. Within the village, we identified 44 pump stations for this hybrid type of system. Originally, the county had done a feasibility study, and they considered just a low pressure system, which would be one pump station on each individual lot. The village saw that as a detriment to acceptance and being able to work and be something that would be an easy system to operate. So one of the main goals was to reduce it, and we were able to reduce it down significantly. There's close to 17,000 linear feet of pressure sewer, 68 manholes, and about 7,000 feet of gravity sewer. That would comprise the system. As far as the treatment plant aspect, all the flow would be pumped to get handled and treated, and because of the environmental importance of the project, we chose a process that could achieve the limited technology for nutrient removal. It also requires a much smaller footprint than other technologies that could be utilized to achieve the same treatment level that we're looking for. Typically on Long Island, nitrogen is the nutrient that you hear about that causes all these issues because we're surrounded by salt water. However, in freshwater bodies, phosphorus is the nutrient that becomes limiting. And with Lake Agawam, you have a unique situation where both of these nutrients play a role because you do have a freshwater body. As far as the location of the treatment plant, it's located up on the village police precinct property, is what our concept is. It would be located in the back. It would be designed to meet setbacks that are required for buffering. It would also treat the water here, and the effluent would go to these lots over here that were identified by the Planning Commission for subsurface recharge. The main objectives of the process were visual appeal. So like I said, it would be enclosed in a building. The building, according to our plan and our budgetary costs, would be designed to match the aesthetics of the existing police precinct because it would be on the same lot. The building would be provided with odor control. It's not going to prevent odors, but it'll mitigate them and minimize them to the maximum extent possible from escaping the facility. It'll also be fitted with noise attenuation. So all the mechanical equipment, all the noisy stuff that's required to aerate, to pump, to treat the water would be in that building behind noise attenuated walls, so you won't have constant humming and noise impacts escaping from the facility as well. Before we get into the cost, I'm going to have Dave from Cameron go into the environmental assessment that was done for the project to give you guys a little insight to that aspect.
Thanks. Hi, I just wanted to give a brief summary of the expanded environmental assessment that was prepared to supplement the map and plan. Basically, both Suffolk County in the Lake Agawam management plan and the village as well have identified sewering as a vital part of restoring the Lake Agawam watershed. And really the two issues that come up in the environmental assessment are the potential growth-inducing impacts of installing sewers. And as was mentioned before, by adopting a new zoning code in advance of this, that really each project will be assessed at a project by project, site by site basis. So we're not going ahead and giving okay for giant developments to come in. And in particular, the uses that would have the highest flow increases, which are apartments, restaurants, and hotels, all require a special exception permit from the village board. So that's another level of review that will go on. The second issue that came up was a archaeologically sensitive buffer area that includes portions of the village. So right now we're working with the village to prepare a scope for that investigation, and that's going to come slightly later in the secret process. And as Nick mentioned before, just a few of the project design components and construction plan components. We're going to try to minimize dewatering as much as possible. Low pressure sewers are generally installed in very shallow trenches. And again, the layout utilizes village right-of-ways, municipal parking lots, and the idea is to minimize all disturbances to private properties and existing tax lots. That's about it.
So, you know, with the preliminary concept design, the environmental assessment that goes along with it to identify potential impacts to the area, the most important part of the project and the mapping plan is really to provide an overview of what is this going to cost? What is the dollar amount that's associated with this type of work? The cost for the project has two components. One of them is capital cost. That's the cost to put pipes, put pumps, put infrastructure in the ground. The other cost component is O&M cost. So that's lifelong costs that people connected to it need to pay to make sure it stays maintained and operating as designed. As far as the capital costs go, and I know again this is very blurry and hard to see, it was broken down by multiple contracts. One for the sewers and then multiple for the treatment plant, which is typical of municipal work and abides by WIC's law. Our cost, we had a schedule initially that pushed this out to 2020 for a midpoint of construction. Again, this is all assumed, and there are a bunch of variables that could push that out or accelerate it. So the escalation factor would be adjusted depending on what the final schedule becomes. In addition to it, there's obviously engineering and construction administration costs associated with it to prepare design documents, to review the contract work as it goes on. There's also construction inspection, so you can verify what's being installed meets the spec and adheres to what you want it to adhere to. And other soft costs are for survey, they're for legal assistance, grant assistance. So the total budget for the project is estimated roughly at about $33 million. That's to construct, design, everything to start up. The other aspect of it is the operation and maintenance costs. Now, to operate and maintain a municipal treatment system, you can do it with your own forces. That means you have to create a different department, a superintendent, you have to staff it, and you have to get workers to work it. Another option and alternative is contracted O&M. So you can contract those services out so you don't have this financial burden to have full-time support staff on hand. You can have one point of contact between the contractor and you can move forward that way. This was a result of conversations with the Planning Commission. You know, we're trying to make the conceptual plan as cost-effective as possible. So we did look into contract operations, and we've estimated it to be slightly cheaper than what it would be to do it with your own staff. O&M is benefit-based, so it's based on how much of the benefit are you getting, and the way that we figure out that benefit is based on flow. The whole system is designed to treat a certain amount of flow, so everyone gets assessed a rate, an O&M rate or a sewer rent based on their flow contribution. So it's $1 per gallon is what that rate is based off of. And this is slightly over $5 a gallon. And now how this all trickles down and relates to annual cost to property owners. It comes down to a sewer tax, which is a debt service to fund the capital costs paid to construct the facilities. The way that we figured it is based on ad valorem, so it's similar to what a school tax would be. It's based on the assessed value of the property relative to the amount financed over that term at whatever interest it is. And the other component, the sewer rent, as I stated, is based on flow, based on the benefit you're getting from the system. So the debt service, the way we had discussed it and the way I had shown you on the first slide for the overview, many of you may have been curious as to why is the whole district the entire village. And the reason being is that a portion of this capital cost is going or is proposed to be distributed across the entire village, since the purpose of the system is to benefit the lake, to improve water quality, and it will also generate additional commercial opportunities in the village. And it's going to be a benefit to everyone, whether you're directly connected or not. So it's not a direct distribution that we have here. It's based on 75% to those who are connected, 25% of the capital cost goes across the rest of the village. The assumption was the village would finance it and bond it themselves at 3.5% over 30 years. And the big component here was we're saying to make it affordable, the village would have to receive $10 million in free money, meaning you don't have, that doesn't get translated to the community and the taxpayers. With that being said, the taxing rates for the district per $1,000 AV would be about $200 for those, $200 per 1,000 AV in the district or in the service area, and about $3 per $1,000 AV for those outside the service area but in the district. Now, to give you a picture and some examples of what this relates to, for inside the service area and outside the service area, you can see we have an example here of a restaurant, 80-seat restaurant. Their total tax and O&M would be about $18,000 a year. And I know that sounds high, but there's been conversations with restaurants in the area down here that drains poorly, and they've been spending more than that annually pumping out their systems. So there shows a benefit there for a restaurant owner. Retail businesses, again, would be about $6,000 inside. And the hotel example we have is the Southampton Inn, which is the highest. But again, when you distribute that over the rooms and occupancy and what it would relate to in terms of increasing the rent rate, I'm not sure. It may not seem as high as it does here when you look at the full number of $130,000. For people outside, if you look at a restaurant, the same restaurant, that would only be $77. You know, the highest, the hotel, which is an example of the Southampton Inn outside, but inside the village, would only be $400 annually. And these seem insignificant to those outside, but relative to the amount of properties inside, this does buffer the burden quite a bit. And it also, it's rational to believe that everyone should pay for it because it is going to benefit the community as a whole, whether you're in the service area or in the village itself. So again, those were the examples that I just had gone through quickly. And I'd like to open it for questions, comments.
Also, can you identify yourself when you ask the
Susan Stevenson, I live in the village. You keep referring to some kind of zoning changes. That's news to me.
No. So, I don't know if you've heard.
They did. Did you mention zoning?
Yeah. So, I believe it was voted on two years ago, maybe a little less.
more.
So somewhere in that range of time. So we went through a process to come up with a plan for the village center. EEK was the consultant. We had a year's worth of meetings, maybe a year and a half worth of meetings. Many in this room helped us out, I've got to say, and were extremely helpful. And we came up with a plan for the village center and how it would grow, which was basically that at the end of the day, I guess two things, that we wanted future development on Windmill Lane and Newton Street to look like what has already been built on Main Street and Jobs Lane. And secondly, we would allow under special exceptions additional uses in the village center, the most important probably being residential use on the upper floors, but also hotel use under a special exception. After the plan went through review, we then came up with a set of zoning rules and design guidelines, which were both of which were approved by the trustees and are on the are part of the zoning text now. So that provided a limit on how much you could build in the village center, because one of the concerns we knew everyone had was when you build a sewer, you allow many lots that now are very hard to be built on now could be built. And so we wanted to make sure that whatever was built once the sewer came into effect was what we as a village wanted, rather than some type of rampant over development. So that was our first step, and we did that before we even got these guys on board, because we thought it was very important to set those limits first. So that is the zoning that he's talking about, and when they did their analysis, they used our zoning as their math in terms of what it showed as what the maximum was of what you could build under the new zoning rules. Now, that build-out may take 40, 50, 60, 70 years, but we wanted to make sure that we were taking that into account as we looked at it. Yes?
May I go up here?
Sure, just identify
Thank you.
yourself.
Yes. Well, fundamentally, we're being asked to pay for a sewer system that we wouldn't need if we didn't have the huge houses that we didn't want and this planned buildup of this village center, which we also don't want. The question that I have about your village center plan, there are two things that are sorely missing, which happen to have been in the 2000 plan. A methodology of how you surveyed the village residents, because I don't see any such proof. I wish the Southampton Association would send out a survey, a mailed survey. I would be delighted to help you with it, because there is no evidence that the residents of this village are in favor of what you're planning for the village center. That's the first thing. The second thing that is wrong, and I think that's a pretty big wrong, the second thing that's wrong with your village center plan is that you have a self-serving concept in there that there is no environmental impact. Well, that's nonsense. Every single amendment to a zoning code requires, according to Chapter 8, Section 617, a full environmental impact study. And I think until you do that, there is need to call a total halt on this, because it's totally out of law, completely lawless. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to make clear sort of the difference, because I think there are terms being used that I would separate. The Village Center Plan, which was adopted 2 years ago, went through very extensive public review over 18 months.
Didn't have an environmental impact statement.
Sorry.
Review. Did not.
I apologize, but let me just finish. And had an environmental review as part of its adoption. So,
I have a plan. All it says is that you don't need it, that there's no environmental impact. That's ridiculous. You need a full-blown C-Corp environmental impact study, not this nonsense. That's eyewash.
I believe that was done at the time, but anyway. Other questions, comments? Yes.
Christian Pico, South Main Street resident.
Right.
I have a question concerning the restaurants,
Yes.
who, as we all may know, are big users of sewage, particularly as they wash dishes. They pump out, is my understanding, regularly their septic tank currently. And I understood the comment that they spend more than the proposed 14 or 18,000, I forget the figure, levy on this proposal. Why give the restaurant a break, who are actually the biggest culprit in terms of the issue that we have for sewage, was my first question. And second question, do we have a proposed map of what is in and what is
Yes.
out? And if we do have it, it'd be great if you could pass it
Let's
around
do
and
it.
give us a copy.
Okay, can we go back to the map first? Yeah. So just, and I know the map's a little hard to read, which I apologize for, and as he said, it will be on the village website. But, right, so it's a little hard to read, but basically, it's very, very close to the area that was the rezoning area for the village center. So it basically is the buildings on the south side of Job's Lane are the southern boundary, and it goes along Hill Street almost to First Neck, I think that is actually on the left. It then goes north. It includes the movie theater, the Southampton Inn, keeps going north, and goes north, I believe, almost to Bowden Square. And as we said, the proposed location for the sewer plant is actually right adjacent to the police center. It then includes, I believe, Jagger Lane. Adjacent to Jagger Lane, which obviously is sort of the northern border, if you will, of the business. district goes back down along North Main Street, and then includes Hill Street up to Town Hall. So that is generally the district, and then on the east side includes all of the commercial establishments along both sides of Main Street. We've tried as best we can to exclude any houses from that, so it's as sort of as unitary a district as you could possibly come up with. And it is, you know, if you look at sort of, I think those who have been hearing about Lake Agawam over the last few years, I think probably the most important part of it is includes all of the Windmill Lane area, which is really where the most of the drainage into the lake is currently happening. Let's go to the. I'm sorry, it includes Hampton Road. I meant Hampton Road. Sorry, I apologize. Hampton Road up to Town Hall. Sorry.
Town hall included in it?
No.
School?
No,
The school?
no, the school is not included.
Why not?
Now, again, the reason for this hearing is to get comments, so if people think other things should or should not be included, that's one of the reasons for the meeting. It's one of the reasons to put the plan on the website, is to get everyone's comments. And, you know, this is really just a plan so that we can get this out and people can comment and tell us what they think should and should not be included. Do you want to go to the budget? The one that shows the split of with the annual cost. And again, this is, you know, as we said before, this is a plan, and your comment and others are part of what we want to hear to sort of figure out what we should be doing. You know, so what we did was, there are certainly restaurants that are paying more than this per year. There are some smaller that are paying less, so this is just an average. You know, obviously, but just understand, the actual cost is really based on the flow. So if you have a large restaurant that's using a lot of sewage, you're gonna have a higher cost than this. If you have a smaller restaurant that's using less, it's gonna be less. So this is really an average. What we're trying to do here, and again, there's no magic to this, and part of the reason for these meetings is to sort of see if we're getting to the right place, is get some balance that both, on the one hand, make sure that the people who are primary users pay a fair share. And one thing we were particularly focused was the annual cost. But at the same time, you know, I think they, in fairness, could say, well, while they are the primary users, there's a lot of stuff happening in that area that's not just from them, and the results that happen really have benefits that go way beyond them. Obviously, a cleaner lake, Agawam. So this is just an attempt to balance, but it's not magic. And you know, the purpose of this is for us to get comments and then get this to the trustees so they can figure out what the right balance should be. Yeah.
I have a follow-up
Yeah.
comment on that issue. Whilst on the O&M, you're going to know post facto the consumption of each one of those
Right.
businesses. I'm unclear how the capital cost will be allocated to those businesses. Could you envision that this capital cost is allocated in a way where someone who is projected to consume more is going to participate more on the capital cost portion of it?
Right
Let me
now,
put
do
it
you want to answer that, or do you want to
in
answer
a
it first?
simpler way,
Yeah, sure.
a restaurant that has 150
No,
seats versus one that has 30 should pay
Right.
more the capital
Right.
cost, knowing that in the future,
Right.
that restaurant.
And you're absolutely right. And that's the beauty of, what we're doing here is no different than what Suffolk County does, and all the other sewer areas across, really, the state, the nation, really. Debt service is recovered by ad valorem, the value of the property. So, in theory, the higher the ad valorem, the more you're going to pay towards that debt. So there's equality there. The issue on the flow, which Paul said, was it's based on flow. So if I use more water than you, I pay more. And that's fair. And so this is a system that, as I said, is universal really throughout, certainly Suffolk County. And there's something like 27 sewer districts, municipal sewer districts, that all use a variation of this. There might be a surcharge in some districts. For instance, there might be a surcharge for commercial. So they might pay maybe $300, $400, $500 just for the sake of their commercial. The justification of that gets difficult because anything you institute has to be defensible
So let me
and fair.
let me add something. So we have a sort of a very hopefully fortunate moment in time, which is currently it's fairly inexpensive for a public entity to borrow. I mean, if you look at rates over a long period of time, we're talking about a 3.5% rate. It's a very good rate. So the idea is the village as a whole would borrow the money, but 75% then of the tax for that borrowing gets paid by the people in the sewer district itself, and that's what it's shown. So the rest of the village is paying 25% of that cost. When you spread that among the entire village and our rather astonishing assessed value in this village, as you see, for a house, in this case it has an assessed value of $21,000, say a $500,000 market value, you're talking about $66 a year. So it's a very minimal cost, but but what we don't want is that someone in the village center starts to complain, why am I paying 100% of this when part of what I'm doing is helping to clean a lake and actually helping with drainage that is already happening that is not necessarily just coming from my establishment. Yes? Sorry, your name.
Michael White.
Right.
I've been dealing with the village long enough, and it all comes down to money, and not everybody's going to be happy. And I think the way to pay for this, without spending any village money, is for the trustees to lobby the state and tell them we want our CPF money for sewers. We have no more land to take in this village and preserve. And we just spent $4 million on the concert property, and this money, and this village has been getting screwed for 10 years. We have not been getting the proper amount of CPF money. That money should be going into a fund, and this sewer will cost us nothing. It'll cost us zero. And, I really think that's what we should be doing instead of, trying to figure out what's fair for businesses and, who's going to pay what. And, I find it hard to believe that the Southampton Inn's going to want to spend $120,000 a year. I mean, it's not going to happen. So I think we should really be writing letters to the state and saying, listen, we don't want our CPF money anymore in preserved land. We want a sewer system, because that's what's going to save our groundwater, not preserving an acre by the pond. That's not going to do anything for us.
I just make one comment. It's very hard for anyone to argue that we shouldn't be getting more CPF money. It's a very hard argument to make. One thing I would point out, which I think we're going to have to be careful about, is there are many, many villages, certainly in Suffolk County and on Long Island, that have a sewer district. In every single one of those, the businesses and residents pay some part of that cost. I think it's going to be very hard to convince people who work in Albany that the only village in New York State where businesses and residents don't have to pay a portion of that cost is the village of Southampton. I don't think that's going to, I'm not arguing whether you're right, I'm just saying politically, it's hard for me to believe that's going to be a winning argument.
But no other villages have the advantage that we do, where we have millions and millions. I mean, we probably lost $30-40 million in CPF funds in this village that have gone to buying farmland in Sagaponack. Why aren't we getting...
I'm not arguing the justice of what you're saying. I'm just saying I think politically that's going to be difficult.
So why aren't we all in this room writing a letter? And I know everybody in this room is good at writing letters and, going to officials. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we writing these letters and saying, listen, we want our CPF in a sewer fund. We don't need to. There's no farmland in the village to buy. There's nothing to buy. It's all built on. So let's take the money from there. And there's no more complaints, there's no more fighting, because you'll be here for 10 years fighting about sewer flow and,
Hopefully not.
the driver's seat's paying too much and the retail stores are paying too little. I mean, we should do that. And I think the mayor is on the board of the CPF, I'm pretty sure.
Right.
So I think that's something that would be very
Okay.
positive for us. And maybe we could do the whole village, maybe we could go to the school and
Right.
take their waste and go, I mean, the village isn't that big, so why don't we start working on that? Because this will never happen. And it's not gonna cost 30 million, it's gonna cost double that when we're done, because it won't be done for 10 years. There's never been a sewer system on Long Island that hasn't gone over budget.
I would just one caveat, and certainly not going to argue with you on where per cost, but just understand the cost that's shown here includes, I think it's $6 million to show the increased cost when it actually gets built. So it's not to today's dollars.
Listen, the Southwest Sewer District was supposed to cost 300 million, it cost like 3 billion when they were done, and it still doesn't work correctly, so.
Hopefully we're not, but
No,
I would
so
say,
go.
just so you're aware, there are other villages that have done sewer districts recently that have come in reasonably on budget,
So we should be doing it now, and we could
Right.
build this next year. What are we waiting 10 years for? I mean, it doesn't make sense.
There is a process you need to go
Well, we
through. Other questions? Yes, sorry, let me just, because he
Oh,
hasn't
I'm
asked
sorry.
anything. Yes,
Horace Bliss,
Right.
village resident. If I understood what you said, when you talk about the ad valorem valuation for the commercial properties,
right,
you're talking about the appraised value,
Assessed.
assessed value,
I'm sorry, the assessed value.
right.
Okay. I think the New York State taxation law is flawed, and while I'm no expert at it, most residential properties are essentially based on assessed valuations, whereas commercial proporties are assessed based on a rental
Right,
assumption.
right.
True.
Yes.
And I think about 4 years ago, I did an analysis. I took the Southampton town assessed valuations, and I used the town because it had a broader universe. And I actually got the paying the assessed valuations that the commercial properties were paying their taxes on. And then I went to, I think it was 7 or 8 properties which were actually sold. We had a willing buyer and a willing seller. And I found out that the assessed valuation for the commercial properties was less than 50% of the resale price. So that would lead me to believe that the valuation and the tax burden that the commercial properties are paying relative to the tax burden that the residential properties are paying is terribly distorted. And if that is true, and I have these statistics, I don't have them here, I would say that this analysis shouldn't be based on ad valorem, it should be based on some other factor. Because what we have here in the village of Southampton is a preponderance of residential homeowners. And if you looked at the residential homeowner universe, they're not interested in doubling the number of commercial operations here in the village. And to find out that in doing so and having this plan, they are now going to be taxed disproportionately to the benefit going to the commercial side rather than the residential side. And how would you respond to possibly changing the allocation of the tax, not on an ad valorem basis, but on a usage basis? Because the ad valorem basis, based on assessments for commercial, I believe is terribly distorted as it relates to the residential. Thank you.
Right. It's an interesting idea. I don't know if it's legal to base the tax on a usage basis. I just don't know. It's an interesting point. It's a very interesting point.
I'm sorry.
I understand your point,
I'm
certainly.
sorry, I paid
Right.
my water, I paid my gas bill,
Right.
my electrical bill.
Sure.
My cable bill,
Right,
on a use basis.
but that's not a tax.
I see.
That's the problem. So the bonds have to be, for the bonds to float, they have to be based on a tax so that the person buying the bonds knows the bond's going to be paid, as you know, no matter what. You might have bonds in your portfolio. You want to know the bond's going to be paid, no no matter what happens. So I just don't know. And it's an interesting idea. We'll find out.
Second
I don't know if
comment
it can be done that way.
Can you find me a $500,000 house in the village of Southampton? I'll buy it right here. Sight unseen.
That's an example.
Well, I'm so glad that the examples are made with recognition of the full reality of life.
Well, but just as an
Second
example,
question.
just
Let's move on.
yeah, but just as an example, just let me just take that. So if you said that house was $1.5 million instead, which I could find you quite a few, you're talking about paying $180 a
Well,
year.
I'm-
So it's a really small amount, but I think it's going to be very important to making this work. But still not a major amount of money.
I always, when I was in the business, we said, figures don't lie, but liars figure.
Right.
We leave it at that.
I hope that's not personal.
No? Question, sir.
Yeah.
You're talking about a leaching field. There's a right-of-way,
That's it. Yeah.
there's a right-of-way behind the
Right.
police station to White Street. And that is the submergent right-of-way that was designated at the time of the creation of the condos there.
Right.
Is any part of the leaching field, piping, pumping stations, anything going to be in that, what I call the submergent right-of-way?
Yeah, I know
to
the
White
right,
Street?
the right-of-way that you're talking about doesn't extend the full depth of the police station. The police station actually abuts the other two tax lots that we're proposing right now.
Whoa. Answer my question.
Yeah, no, it's not going through it.
That's all, that's
Yeah.
all. The answer is that right-of-way to White Street, this, what I call the submergent right-of-way, it probably has a better title. There will be no piping, pumping, no leaching, nothing. That's pristine. Not
Yes.
gonna be touched.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Other questions? Yes.
My name is Jay Deasing, a resident of the village. I know during Sandy, Up Island, a number of sewer districts
You could answer
had
this.
major problems when there was extreme flooding. And obviously, that's something that I think is a major concern out here. How does this system deal with that, and has it been tested, this type of technology for heavy rains, flooding, hurricane potential on the east end?
You want me to answer that,
Yeah,
Frank?
go ahead.
So the type of system that we're talking about, when we talked about decreasing the number of pump stations, the original design was a typical low-pressure system, which was fully pressurized, fully enclosed. Each property had its own station. Patchogue has a lot of properties serviced by a system similar to that, or the same exact system as that. These systems are typically used in areas that are prone to those issues. So they're used in Florida considerably. In the Carolinas, they're used considerably. The reason why we decrease the pump stations is because with the typical system, in an event like you're talking about, and the power goes out to the house. How does the pump work? So what we did was we created these municipal stations that'd be municipally owned that would have automatic backup power on hand. So they would stay energized, they would keep pumping. And again, the construction aspects of this type of sewer system would be constructed so that these pump stations would be flood-proof.
We're required by code to construct whatever physical facilities above the, well, in this case, we'll be going probably to the 500-year flood level. So everything will be certainly above that. On the stations that we're talking about, they're watertight, so water can't get in. And on the manholes, we put a waterproof cover that sits inside the manhole, so that rainwater and flood water can't get in it. And also, we put backflow preventers on the lines that come from the house to the gravity system, so the flow can't go into the house. So believe me, with all the New York rising and everything that's going on with the devastation, people have become more aware of designing to that criteria.
Other questions?
Just one
sorry.
follow-up on
Yes,
that.
of course.
On the cost side,
Yeah.
when we originally had the first presentation, I think at that point it was indicated that there would be no cost allocated to residents of the village. And so I think this is a bit of a change, and I think given that obviously here in the business district, there's going to be a significant benefit accruing to the business owners. I think you might want to reconsider that component allocation. Although it's relatively small, I think it's amazing how these small surcharges seem to add up. And I think that certainly if I wanted to improve my septic system, I'm not sure if I knocked on many village business doors that I'd get some people who want to chip in. So I kind of think that the rest of the community, certainly because we want to get grant money and we may want to participate, and there are certainly some benefits to us.
I guess, Jay, look, so let me actually put it the opposite way. So let's say we came up with a plan to improve the water quality in Old Town Pond. Should you pay 100% of that cost, or should that be spread throughout the village? Because that's really what we're talking about. What we're saying is the major benefit to this, I guess everyone's focusing on the owners, and that's certainly part of our job here, is to make sure that, for example, in the future, someone can open a new restaurant in the village, which is basically impossible to do now. However, a very major benefit of this for the village is cleaning up Lake Agawam. And I think what you got to think about is, do we want to set a precedent that as we clean up the waters in our village, that only those who are directly affecting that pond should be paying for it? Because that's really what you're saying. You're saying if 5 years from now we come up with a plan for Old Town Pond, only you and your neighbors should be paying for that. I should not be paying for that. I'm not sure that's the right approach.
How you doing? My name's Mark Wagner, and I'd like to add a little bit to the discussion because it's a great question. When we look at it from an environmental standpoint, the sewage treatment plant is going to be putting out less than 5 milligrams per liter of nitrogen. So those people inside the box, so to speak, their sewage is going to be treated to the highest level that's technically available. And people say, well, my septic tank, it works, meaning, it's not gurgling up in the backyard, but an average septic tank, puts out 45 milligrams per liter of nitrogen. So even though you're not in the box, you're continuing to pollute at a rate that's 10 times greater than the people that are in the box. So I think going to the village-wide district, everybody really has to participate, because even though you're not in the box, you're contributing a much greater amount of nitrogen on a percentage basis.
There was a question, really what started this was, there was a question from the audience that same night that you're referring to. And that question was, why aren't, if we're cleaning up the lake, isn't everybody participating? That question spurred a lot of discussion within the work groups and the various meetings that we've had. But again, this is what this meeting is for, is to get that kind of comment.
Right. Yes.
Dan Galizio with Peconic Baykeeper.
Right.
I just have two quick questions. The first is, you referenced two numbers in terms of the capacity of the plant. I think it was 130,000 gallons per day and 200,000 gallons per day.
The 130,000 gallons a day was representative of existing build-out, and the 200,000 gallons a day would be the design capacity to account for future growth that would result from the change of zone.
So that would allow for roughly a 50% or 55% increase above
Roughly.
existing.
Right.
Okay. And then the second question involves, you referenced that this wouldn't solve the problem with Lake Agawam, but it would help reduce the nutrient loads to the lake. Do you have a percentage in terms of how much of the contribution is coming from the properties you're hooking up and how much is coming from other properties?
I don't have those numbers now, but there was a Suffolk County sewer feasibility study. Again, the study area was slightly different than this, but in that report, it did identify the actual mass loading from groundwater underflow to the lake.
It would just be helpful to know that, I think,
Right,
so that
right.
you can make a
Very
rational
good, yeah.
decision about whether or not it's
Yeah.
cost
Yeah.
effective.
Yeah. And I want to be clear, this is just a very, very much a piece of many steps that need to be taken. I think many steps that need to be taken on Lake Agawam, but it is one step, an important step to do it. Yes?
Valerie Hart, I have a question. Where actually is the effluent going to go?
Do you want to go back to that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Once you walk up there.
So the effluent that you asked for, it's gonna go to these lots down here,
So it's going to stay right with the sewage treatment plant, basically?
basically, yes. And it's, huh?
It's crossing Cooper's Farm.
Yeah, along Cooper's Farm Road, those vacant properties over there that were identified by the planning commission.
I thought Oris asked that question and you said no, it would have no effect on that.
Well, the right-of-way, the paper street he's talking about, as far as I am aware, doesn't extend all the way down here. It only extends to here.
But
We were gonna cross onto this lot directly here. There's a common property line.
I thought Oris asked if that was a submerging right of way.
The right-of-way, as far as I see from all the tax maps, doesn't go all the way down to the condo property as he was indicating.
Well, let me ask this question. Who owns and what is that property? You just,
These green lots over here?
no green lots.
Which one?
Well, I don't have, what?
These
you
are
gonna-
village-owned. These are village-owned
I
properties.
understand that. Is that property that you just pointed out going to be invaded in any way by pumps, sewage, leaching fields?
Leaching pools,
They're gonna be in that area.
yes.
What authority does the village have to take that property and turn it into a leaching field?
When you say take the property, it's village owned.
I understand that.
Well,
It was granted to the village pursuant to the submergent. I don't have the documents, the documents which describe the grant. Well, what do those documents say about the use of that property? Can they put a helicopter pad in there, or?
I don't know, we'll check. It's a good question. I get your point. So you're asking, do you have the actual right to use the property for that use, which is a very good point.
And if the village
We'll
wants to
check.
use that property for another reason, depending on what the grant says, do they have to get
Right.
village
a good
residents'
question.
approval?
Good question, very good question.
Can I also just ask what technically what happens on those lots? Is this mostly below ground?
It's all below ground,
So that once you do the restoration, you'll see, what will you see?
grass.
Will there be some manhole?
There will be some, yeah, for access, but mostly it'll look like a grass field.
Do you hear anything?
No.
Odors?
Odors?
No.
No, it's
You said
treated,
odor
it,
elimination might be difficult, you said.
I said odor mitigate, yeah, at the treatment facility, this is treated effluent, so
But
typically.
where's the treatment facility now in relation to that?
The treatment facility is
parcel?
inside a building, right? This is
Where is it
where,
located?
next to the police station, on the police station property, on the
So
village.
you would have, behind the submerging condos, you would have a leaching field with odor, which you're going to try to mitigate.
There's no odor.
No, the odor mitigation is related to inside the building where all the nasty stuff is. There's water coming out,
Where's the building now? Can you point to it?
that's the police station, that's the, I guess, emergency operations facility proposed, and then this would be the treatment plant.
Yes.
In the breakdown of costs for the capital, you used a hotel, and one of the hotels, which was one of the highest payors, is that correct?
Yep,
So I was in another meeting where one of the hotels in this area there's a big talk of it turning into condos. What would that do to the cost payout? And because the assessment on condos, let's say, I think it was 40 condos.
well, I don't know what it's gonna be assessed at, that's all speculative, I
Let me
can't.
actually put it a different way.
Okay,
The reason why hotels tend to pay so much is they have very high sewer use.
but don't condos?
Condos do not have as high, but yes, they had, but it will be based on
40 condos
usage.
as opposed to this
Well,
is
based
the
on usage.
Southampton Inn.
There's a
This
restaurant
was
in the
Catco.
Southampton Inn,
Right.
there's other uses in the Southampton
Right.
Inn that contribute to the higher flow.
Right.
Well, those aren't going to be happening probably either.
But
I
you
don't
see-
know. There was once a proposal for a restaurant, but I mean,
So let's step back.
yeah, I'm interested in the
I think the
money.
reason why the hotel pays, in this theory, such a high amount, with again, this is just the plan for the comment, but the reason it did here is because it had such high flow. That's really the reason for the.
I know.
So if there's not a hotel and it's some other use with a lower flow, it won't pay as much.
but the initial payment for the capital plan, to pay for the actual,
But again.
They're broken down here.
Yeah.
The sewer assessment, based on what the concept was ad valorem based. So the hotel is showing a $28,000 sewer tax. The user charge, which is benefit on flow, is over $100,000 because of the flow that they'd be
right,
contributing to
so
the
the
system.
user, but are you so that there's a huge change there, is there not? And who's taking up the slack? That's what I want to know.
There is not,
It's flow based, and
It's flow-based.
that's it.
cost a certain amount to operate based on flow. Whatever the flow is what someone's paying. So a restaurant, to use an example we've been talking a lot about tonight, particularly a very large restaurant's going to pay a lot because there's a lot of flow. A hotel has a tremendous flow.
In this, there is no discussion of condos on this chart, is
Yeah,
there?
there is. It's called residence at the bottom. But
What kind of
Well,
residence?
no, that was single. We're not showing, in this chart, there are no
Well, there's
condos.
a
we don't have any
potential
condos
for-
This
currently.
is just an example.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
just-
We're interested in the money.
Right, okay, so what
There's
you're
a
asking,
change, sir.
I mean, if we see an assessed value, we have the rates.
Right.
It's
so
pretty easy
so
math
so
based
what
on
you're
the
asking
model.
is, could you do analysis of if a condo was to be created within the
Well, there was a
district?
plan presented in front of the trustees. I mean, I don't think it's just hearsay.
That's fine, but we don't, currently there are no condos in this district, but we could do the analysis if the condo was created, what
If
the
the hotels
tax
were
would be.
not, and there were condos, let's say. Yeah.
Is the village latch inside the box?
No.
Yes, I believe it is.
No.
So a condo,
Yes.
Oh, it is?
someone negotiating to buy the village latch and convert that into a residential condo would be benefiting by being inside the box.
When you say benefiting, I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, think about it.
No, seriously, I'm not sure what you mean.
Okay, I'll pull the question.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't understand what you're referring to, I really
Let it
don't.
Let it go. I have
Yeah.
a question.
Yes.
Is it just New York State on the capital gains? I mean, on the tax for the actual cost of the plant? Is it just New York State that says the property should be based on a tax? Or what do other states do if they have sewer systems?
Yeah, this is really the typical, for better or worse, and we might decide it's the wrong way, as Mr. Bliss is pointing out. But I think this is really typically the way sewer systems are paying for. So,
I basically, that's a specific question.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
Either, is it just New York State based on this?
No.
it's throughout the nation.
Okay, I'd
Yeah.
like to know the percentage of different states that have different, maybe base the capital
I actually don't
costs
know
on
of
other
any,
things.
but we'll find out. I don't know any
Okay,
that
good.
do it
That's a
other
good
than on a
question.
tax basis.
And then I just have one other question about the effluent when it goes out in the area that you speak about. From my understanding of sewage treatment plants, you can't really walk on the areas where the effluent is. Am I correct about that?
No, that's not true.
No, you have.
Okay, so this is what the system looks like, because there seems to be some confusion. They're leaching pools,
Yeah, I
similar
understand that,
to.
but you can't walk over them
Oh,
once
sure
they've
you
been
can.
closed?
Sure can.
So you could keep that parkland, people take their dogs up there and let them go and
Absolutely,
everything?
absolutely.
Half of the area that they've got here is already a leaching pool area. If you pull the map up.
It's for the subdivision.
Yeah, but it's all drainage pools and stuff that are there.
In there?
Right across on Cooper's Farm
Yeah.
Road. That, not the lighter green, the whole darker green,
Yes.
that whole area right there is all leaching pools.
What's going in there, from where?
It's all underground, it's been there. Smergeon put it in when he developed the whole area.
Subdivision.
But
Yeah.
does that mean there's enough percolation there to take,
Right.
No, it's all
very low,
drainage
isn't
area,
it?
so. Yeah, it's low.
if he's already
that gonna
got
be-
the...
We also
That's-
talk about the water quality.
Stormwater drain.
The water
That's
quality.
all road
Okay.
runoff,
The
everything
effluent
that goes
on
in
that
there.
plant,
It's a whole
there's no
series of
relation.
pools. We've got leaching pools, we've been installing them for the last several years. I mean, we've got them, over by the public house, we installed a bunch of them right by the dog park, we put a bunch of
Right.
them in. People were walking on them all the time, so.
Right.
The effluent also from this membrane technology, it's very high quality.
I mean, it's just one step from potable water.
Yes?
I have a question. Originally, when we were many, many years ago talking about sewage treatment, one of the questions that came up with the engineers, and there were several engineers there, they were all saying that if we eliminate all of the cesspools throughout the village, they create a certain amount of pressure in the ground, which basically would have an effect on the lake has its, what do they call them, springs. And that if that pressure were eliminated, it's a good chance that the lake could dry up. Is that possible? I mean, I remember that distinctly, and it was not just one, it was two different engineering groups talking about that. And that they had seen it happen in other areas. Would hate to go through all of this
Mark,
and find out
You
that.
want to respond, because you were the one who did the study with the hospital.
If you
Actually,
take the
stand
water,
stand up so everybody can hear.
I'm Mark Wagner. If you took the water that is recharging in that area and say you shifted it to a different location that they recharge, for example, you had a pipe and it went into the Great South Bay and it bypassed the lake. So the groundwater that's going down today, even from everybody's cesspools, that's constantly recharges the groundwater levels. But if you transferred it out, for example, there are different watersheds here. There's one over by the hospital. There's another natural watershed. If you took the effluent from over there and put it over here, then you could have a lowering of the groundwater. It's very common back to the west where sewering has lowered the groundwater, so some of the streams have dried up in southwest and
Because this is a flood zone along in
But this is
there.
the same.
this is in the
This is
same watershed, so
watershed
water's
area,
going
so
back,
everything goes.
and it's gonna go down to the lake, but at a
Okay.
much cleaner, as I said, it's gonna be probably less than 5 milligrams per liter nitrogen, which is, over time, is gonna help dilute the
Right.
existing groundwater that's going to the lake.
Just think of it, instead of the water from the cesspools, and because they're cesspools, going into
understand.
the ground,
Right.
we're just intercepting it, treating it really well,
And
and
putting
still
it back in
sending
the
it.
ground.
Yeah, that's it.
Right. Yes?
If we say 5%, is that drinking water quality? The 5%?
No.
It removes the nitrogen, but it's still not
It's
drinking
the-
water?
Just to give you an example, in some other towns, that type of water is used to water lawns, but it's not drinking water.
But that would be 10 then, wouldn't it? If it's,
The limit for drinking water nitrogen is 10.
yeah, but for actually drinking water, it should be 5. You mentioned 5, so that's why I thought it was drinking water standard.
It's not quite there. Drinking, right now, groundwater standards of discharge are 10, so this is gonna be
So it's 10.
half of that. This is gonna be half of that. It's gonna be 5 milligrams per liter.
Well, that's nitrogen.
That's
That's
nitrogen.
10, isn't it?
There are other constituents in wastewater.
Okay.
There's pharmaceuticals, there's
Okay.
personal care products, there's metals, so.
No, I understand that, but I just wanted to note, 10, I think it's 10 milligrams.
10 milligrams per liter is the drinking
Is
water
what-
quality
is what
standard.
you're-
Any other place in Suffolk County, if we were building this plant, we design it for 10 milligrams per liter.
Okay, so you've designed it for 5.
We're designing it for the limit of technology. It's even better than 5.
Okay.
So
Well,
there's
is it-
no better process available currently that can get it below what we're trying to do.
I thought 5 would be a drinking water quality.
No.
Well, for nitrogen,
For nitrogen.
what Frank's saying, there's other components in wastewater in order to, there's a lot of other reasons why you're not taking wastewater and just putting it back into your faucet because of the stigma and everything, but there's disinfection. There's a lot of other things that need to be done to
Look at
kill
the arid
viruses.
states, look at what's happening in California, look at, to get it to the level of reusing as drinking water, you're talking about a $200 million project.
Okay.
Yes?
Yes, Deborah Bates. I had a couple of questions. First of all, I wondered how the town efforts are figuring into this in terms of the residential pollution of the lake. have you considered what the town is doing in terms of its efforts to have residences improve their systems? And I didn't know if the town is doing anything with the business areas or the hamlets. Has anyone
Not that I'm aware
investigated
of,
that
but
at
we'll
all?
find out.
Because I think it would be
I
important down the
don't
line.
think there's any movement at all.
It's been
Well, it's,
reported
you're
on.
talking about improvement of household systems.
Household systems, yes,
Yeah.
but also they'll do something with the hamlets, I'm sure, Watermill, Hampton, Bridgehampton, certainly. I just wondered how the town is anticipating.
I don't know.
Because it would seem to
We're
me you'd want to have
incorporated,
a
yeah.
coordinated
Good question.
effort to some degree. The other thing is, you had mentioned that the mapping and so forth is on the website. I didn't see it. I saw your report that you...
No, the report's on the website. This
But
is
not-
about to go on the
Oh, so
website.
the mapping and all that.
No,
so
no,
none
this
of
will
that
go on the
is
website,
up.
I guess, tonight or
Okay. You should have
tomorrow.
checked the
Isn't,
slides.
isn't the draft mapping
The other-
plan, or no?
The
No.
other question I had, I noticed in your report on page 6, I think, that you're anticipating the village is going to issue a negative declaration on this. Is that true? Under
I would-
secret, what, are you doing a full-scale secret review or
It's
aren't you?
environmental assessment.
But you-
A full environmental
We're
assessment.
doing it.
You're doing a full secret review, full long-form review,
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
not a negative
yeah.
declaration, because then you should check the report on page 6.
Okay.
Because you're saying at this time we anticipate that the village board will adopt a negative declaration.
I think it's in the proposal.
Presumptuous on our part, not.
There was a proposal.
And
Yes.
that the board was going to classify the action as an unlisted action. That's what it says. I'm not, this
not
isn't
like
an attack, I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah.
saying what I
That's what I'm
read.
saying.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's not, you want to clarify that?
Sure.
Paul, in line
Yeah.
with that, where can we find the finally environmental impact statement from the business district? Is that on the website? I couldn't find it.
I don't know if it still is, but I'm sure we
It
could
never
find it.
was. Well, is there a printed copy that we can get?
Sure, there
It
was,
deals
there
with
certainly
what?
was a printed copy,
Traffic?
yes.
No, I have to jump, sorry, excuse me. I believe there was no full, there was a negative declaration.
But there
was no
wasn't-
secret review.
But there was an environmental form filled out.
Well,
But
he neg
all it
decked it.
said
I'd
was
like to
that
know
you
what
didn't
he
need it.
wouldn't neg deck.
Thank you, exactly.
I'm not sure I understand the point of the question. That zoning was done 2 years ago.
No,
Are
I'm
you
not,
presuming
I don't want to,
we should
it's
redo the
just as a
zoning?
point of information. I'm not
Okay.
trying to,
Okay,
I'm just saying there wasn't a secret.
okay. Other questions? Yes.
I think one of the gentlemen before was trying to get at certain properties, like on Windmill Lane and maybe the Southampton Inn, they're gonna take a triple and quadruple worth of their property by having a sewer system, because there's some properties that are basically unbuildable, can't be expanded, can't have a wet use.
Right.
So they're getting a huge windfall. Like, I know of one building, it's gotta be worth triple if they get a sewer system, because I know he can't do anything with it, and it's basically worthless right now. There's no place for a sewer system. And, if you're not gonna go after CPF funds or something, I think they should pay more of the burden, because they
They are.
really are getting the lion's share, and there should be some kind of appraisal. And, it's not fair if somebody has a building that's worth $500,000 and now it's worth $6 million because they have a wet use and
But again,
apartments.
I think you're misunderstanding the math a little bit, and I understand your point. So if it's based on ad valorem, exactly what you said,
Yeah.
they have, and let me use Mr. Bliss's point for a second. They now have very little income, so they have a very low tax. If you're right, which I believe you are, after the sewer, they'll have a much higher income. They will pay a much higher tax, and therefore they will pay a very high amount on the sewer.
But it's.
That's the way it works. No, in all due respect, sorry. In all due respect, that's the way it works. And we said, in addition to the fact that because their tax will go up, they'll be paying a very high percentage, they will also pay a usage rate that other people in the village won't pay, because obviously when they're now able to reuse their building, there are users who are using sewer. But let me make a third point, which I really think is very important, and somewhat honestly disappointed in some of the things we're hearing. It is really, as a private citizen and a resident of this village, it is really important for the village that we don't have vacant buildings in the village business district. And the idea that someone somehow thinks it's a good idea to have a vacant building on Windmill Lane, to me, is horrifying, because it's part of what really makes the village business district not as good a place and as pleasant a place for those of us who live in the village to use that it would be otherwise. So I think every one of us in the village, and that was in the village center plan, and it's something it was a major goal for us, that 20 years from now, Nugent Street and Windmill Lane look like Main Street and Jones Lane. That's really our goal. And so if we want that goal to happen, we have to help make it happen.
Nobody's arguing that point. My point is,
I
I
thought
have
you were.
a 3-acre lot on North Main Street,
Right?
all right? By rights, I can only get 3 1-acre lots, but according to zoning, I could get 12 lots. I need a sewer. So why don't you run the sewer up there, and my property will be worth 12 times what it's worth right now. And that's what I'm talking about. You can't pick and choose who's going to make money, who's not going to make money. And if I'm in the sewer district on North Main Street, well, you should run it up the road for me, because you can't tax
This may
me.
be astonishing to you, but what you just said, who's going to make money, had nothing to do with our goals. So maybe that should be a goal we have, but that was not our goal. Our
But
goal,
you have
sorry,
a burden.
our goal was to make a major step forward in addressing the issues of the lake and provide a way for the village business district to develop in the right way going forward. Those were our goals. If you look at our goals had never been to find a way for people to make money, although I understand any zoning, anything we do, that's part of what happens. But if you think that this this sewer district should be extended, we understand that, and that would be one of the comments, that you think the sewer district is too small.
Well, if you're going to ask everyone to pay for it, until it gets to them, they shouldn't be subsidizing the businesses, you know? And
No one's being subsidized.
It's not, you're asking us to pay for it. Why would we pay for it? And I doubt that pond is polluted because of the businesses there. It's from runoff. Yesterday, you had millions of gallons of water going into Lake Agawam. Now, don't tell me that's not the source of the pollution.
It's one of many sources.
Well, you're just hitting a little part of what's wrong with that lake, and there should be more drainage put in town. There's a lot of other things, and I have a problem, and I think a lot of people have a problem in this room with everybody funding that.
Okay.
And people, they have their septic systems on village property right now, that's not supposed to be going on like that. And these people, I understand keeping the business hamlet going, but you're asking a lot of the people here,
But I think that maybe you didn't hear what Mark was mentioning about the quality of the effluent that's coming out of that plant. The other people in the rest of the village are really polluting our water source at a rate 10 times greater than the people in the village center. You see what I'm saying? The amount of nitrogen that comes out of that plant is at the level of 5. Whereas what comes out of a septic system is at the level of 45 to 55. So so that's why as a community, we are protecting our aquifer.
I understand that, but if we were protecting our aquifer, and we were told 10 years ago about CPF funds, what that was for, why aren't we having a referendum?
I think you have a good point there.
Why
Nobody's
don't
arguing
we
that.
have a referendum and we vote to opt out of CPF and have our own CPF funds? Because this
I think it takes an act of the state legislature, with all due respect. But anyway, Sorry, seriously, can we go on to another
No, but
question?
you're talking about something that you're never going to fund. This is like,
But just-
this will never happen.
But just
It's
with
been-
all due respect, from a legal point of view, the only way you can opt out of CPF is an act of the state legislature.
Well,
That's not a village referendum.
But we should do it then, instead
I
of.
just had one other brief
Yes.
clarification. Was this elementary school and town hall going to be included or not?
Not
No,
included.
not included right now.
Are
But
you
again,
open
this is the
to-
reason we're having
I
this
would
meeting, to make
think-
comments.
I don't know how many people are in the school on it. What's the enrollment in the school now? It's
1,500 or so?
in the elementary school?
No, total.
I'm just saying, there's hundreds of people in there every day, year-round.
But they are so...
I don't even want to speculate on town hall, but I would think it would make a lot of
Yeah.
sense if you're going to pursue this.
Right.
Part of the
That
issue is
does.
that they're also not taxable
They're
properties.
exempt.
They're exempt properties.
Well,
So
maybe
you don't have
something
a-
could be,
you don't have a-
maybe
you
something
don't have
could be
a assessed
arranged
value
that
on
they
it.
would,
I
I
mean,
would
it-
find it rather odd if the
Right,
town,
but there,
Well,
given its efforts, would not get on
well,
board
maybe we'll
with
get a
it.
good supervisor in there we can talk to.
I'm just saying.
That's a good point.
But, you know, I think it would certainly
But
make
it's-
sense. And another, just refreshing,
yes.
you had mentioned this is semantic issue. This is not technically a hearing in the sense that hearings
No.
would be.
Correct.
It's public.
Correct.
Just,
It's a public meeting.
Yeah.
thank you.
Other questions?
No, except that I do agree with Deborah. I mean, I understand the non-tax part of it,
Right.
but I also understand the environmental
Right.
part of it.
Right.
And really, the purpose of all of this is the environmental part of it,
Right.
not
But-
about the tax. So I think we really have to look into a way of
Right.
including the school and town hall in it.
but it's a little bit outside of the tributary area
Not really.
of the lake. It's, well, yeah, it could be included, but it's,
Okay,
it's
I understand your
some
point.
distance.
So just to recap, two things we've heard tonight is, should the district be extended further east in effect on Hampton Road? And should the district be extended further north on North Main and North Sea? And those, honestly, that second we've looked at from time to time, so.
And how about the restaurants on Elm Street? They're not included.
There's, well, that's really
There's
then
three
creating
of
a
them
very
over there.
different sewer district.
I
We've
know.
tried to create
I
a
know.
fairly
I know,
well-contained one.
but it's just a thought.
Right,
I mean, we have
right.
three very active
Right,
restaurants
right,
down there.
Right. Other
The
questions?
The larger the district, the more infrastructure that gets
Right.
disturbed.
True.
The greater the cost
Right.
is. So really what we try to focus in on is just the village business district itself and try to keep it as contained as
Right.
possible. That's why, talking to the school system and the
Right.
town hall, it's
Starts to
adjacent.
get more complicated.
If you go further up North Main
Right.
Street, or you try to
Right.
incorporate, I mean, we looked at a lot of that
Yes, we
stuff,
did.
and it's just, even going up by the train station, incorporate the restaurants up there, it's just, the further you get out, the more
Right.
disturbances you have, the
Right.
more pumping stations that you have to have, the greater operational costs, the greater capital costs. You really can run this thing through the roof as you grow.
Let me also say two other things. One is, one great advantage of this as we started to look at this was because there are so many common parking lots in the sewer district we proposed, a tremendous amount of the infrastructure can go in those parking lots.
Right.
So, and that's gonna make this have a lot less impact on the village than if, you know, you have an area where you don't have those parking lots. The second is, this area is very similar, not exactly identical, but it's very, very close to identical to the zoning study. And so we know in this district what can be built. And so to the extent we extend it, we would have to look very carefully when you extend further, what, you know, because what does the current zoning allow? And that's one thing we really were very careful, as I said at the beginning of this, was to do the zoning first so that we weren't, you know, I think one concern we heard when we started this process 5-6 years ago is, let's not let the sewer district in effect become a way to get a waiver building in the village that we don't want.
Correct.
And so we worked very hard. So this district, as we proposed, really fits that rezoned area. So if we go beyond the rezoned area, then we'll have to look at what you could build in that area. Sorry,
I
yeah.
do see where the end of Elm Street is beyond the area.
Right.
However, I'm not totally convinced that the elementary school
Right.
and town hall is
Okay.
beyond, especially since
Right.
they'll be running something
They're all
along
chasing.
Hampton
They're all
Road. It's
chasing.
not
Right.
that far.
Yep, yep.
And that's a big, I mean, they employ a lot of people
Right,
in
right.
town hall. And there's a lot of children
Yep.
using elementary school teachers and everybody else, so.
Yep. Yeah,
It makes perfect sense to do the plan first.
right.
I appreciate that as a
Right,
planner, it makes
right.
perfect sense, It's nice
Right.
to see. It's just if the goal is to improve water quality in the lake, it also makes sense to understand where the biggest contributors are
Right.
to that water impairment
Right.
are stemming from.
Right.
So, and then you can make, I think, better decisions about which properties
Right.
want to be included and which
Right.
properties
But
ought not to be
in
included.
this-
One thing I would say is in the study that the state funded, the county funded? County funded, sorry. Windmill Lane was really identified as where a tremendous amount, and the village center, was really where a tremendous amount of this type of effluent was coming from.
And I think that when it comes to the town hall and the elementary school, I think that they should, but I think the pressure should be on them to treat their water in a much better way. Instead of septic systems, they should install a chromoglass system or other types of system that treats their water, because their flow is large enough to be able to sustain a small little
Thank you,
system.
Michael.
So that would be a smarter way than to try to connect onto ours and create.
So in real life, what happens? We are required to design to Suffolk County Department of Health Services standards. They have a flow number. So if you have an apartment, you have to use 225 gallons per day, or some number. Well, in reality, that number is way out of whack. It's probably 70% less than that number. So for the purposes of designing the plant, we have to show the regulatory agencies that we have complied with flow standards. But what happens in real life is the plant actually sees the numbers that it should see, meaning that it's not 225, it's probably more like 175. So what I'm saying is that as people start to connect, you start evaluating not the capacity, but what is the actual flow. So what that means is there's built-in capacity. Now, for the schools and some of these other businesses, what we do is and what sewer districts do is they have out-of-district connections. So even though they weren't part of the original plan, somebody petitions, let's say somebody up by the railroad station says, you know what, I want to connect. Well, that's fine, you can connect, but it's going to cost you $30 a gallon. That's a typical number that's used. And you have to pay for the extension of the line. In Patchogue put in over 15 miles of sewer just by using that technique. So the village designed for a bigger plant. They have since sold that capacity, banked all that money, and that money's being paid to do resurfacing because of the impact that sewers have on the infrastructure, the general infrastructure. They use it to do sidewalks and curbing and crosswalks and everything else, because that money that was contributed from those out-of-district connections are used to fund the other aspects of the village. So there is a built-in mechanism, but before you even think about that, you have to build the plant. You have to get started. So there is a way to do that.
I'll take one or two more questions and then we're gonna, yes.
Will the map have the street names on it that goes on the website?
We'll make sure it does, yeah.
The street names
Yeah,
are on
yeah.
it, it's just very hard to say.
Yeah. Apologize.
We'll get a better map on it.
Yeah, yes, we'll get a better map up. Even if we have to take a few days to get a better map, we'll get a better map.
No, we have to
Yes.
break.
Yes.
I was involved in a project that was out of state, and what we did was we built the lift station for a subdivision, and we built the piping. Now,
Right.
they amortized the money that we invested, and everybody that hooked in between where we took it from to the subdivision paid us back.
Right.
Have they ever thought of that? Because basically, in other states, it doesn't cost anything for municipalities to build sewer systems because they amortize, private people build these plants. And they put the pipes in the ground, and you're smiling, but you don't realize what goes on in other states.
No, I
You
do,
have
but that's
somebody
when
like-
there's a lot of growth going
Well,
on, so
listen,
there's
you
new
have-
houses being built.
Well, listen, when you have the Southampton Inn, let's say, and I know they want to do a project, something like that, they would contribute whatever their plant costs, let's say $1 million if they had to build a plant, they would give it to the district. And they would be allowed to hook into the district, and everybody that hooked in from where the system ended to where they connected would pay them back their money. And it's always been a way of deferring the cost so the municipality doesn't have to pay for it. And there's plenty of people that would pay to have the sewer lines in this village extended. People that are developing things would extend it. I would pay to extend it.
No, but again, let me just caveat one more time, because the process we've gone through, which is a really different process than what you're talking about, is we did a very careful study and plan for the village center. And we came up with a sewer district, basically for the village center. If we're talking about and I'm not saying it's the wrong thing, I'm just trying to explain different process. if we were to look at a sewer that would extend very far beyond the village center, we would have to do a very different study and a zoning study of what would happen when you extended the sewer way beyond. So again, I just want to be very careful that the process we've come up with is to have a sewer system which we can defend as being one that relates to the zoning in the area that it's covered. So I understand your point, and your point is correct. You could do it, but that would really be a different approach than the way we've done
Well,
it here.
but right now, you've spent 6 years, you don't have a pipe in the ground,
I don't-
and no schedule of when you're putting
Unless
a pipe in the
I-
ground. And how much has been spent already on studies and drawings and, like, to date, how much have we spent?
Well, not a lot of money.
$38,000.
Yeah, $38,000.
It's been,
Right, it's nothing.
It's nothing, but we have nothing.
Well, I would disagree with you.
What is
Yeah,
it?
no, I think that-
I disagree, this has been a lot of work here.
Right.
No, I
tremendous
get
amount.
it, it's a lot of work for what you paid, I'm not
I
questioning
I understand
whether
your
they're
comments, but
entitled.
with all,
The question is, why is there always, in this state, we spend so much money and time on study after study after study? Why can't we just get this done? It doesn't make
that's
sense.
the reason for
That's
this
what I'm
meeting.
trying to do.
Right. Okay, anybody in the planning commission want to? Yeah.
I just want to make a comment. Does anybody know what happens after your cesspool gets pumped? What happens to that water?
It's trucked away.
Well, it gets sent over to Riverhead to a processing plant, or it goes to Bergen Point, and then it's pumped into Peconic Bay or pumped out in the ocean. Now, in 1959 and 1960, Suffolk County and New York State did a survey of Long Island and our water supply. And what it basically came up with is the biggest problem that Long Island's going to face is the sewer treatment plants pumping all this fresh water back out in the ocean and not recharging their aquifer. With this particular plant, they're going to recharge our aquifer. And that's what they should be doing in all these plants. And there's a whole article written, it tells you how many people that Nassau County could have and how many people Suffolk County could have. And the ironic thing, it was in a journal from Stony Brook University from the history department. Don't ask me why it ended up in this book, because I belong to the society, and they sent it, and the whole thing was in there. And they've already done a study on it. And the biggest problem Long Island's got faced with is the sewer treatment plants pumping the treated water out into the ocean instead of recharging it back in their aquifer.
Yeah, I had two comments. The first was, I think it's, really great that it's associated with the study that was done of the Village Business District. So anything we look at that's beyond that, I think we should look at very carefully. This business, we looked at how the additional sewage might impact development within that district. So that, I think was a good idea. And then, just point of clarification, I remember from a previous meeting that some of the reason for having a village-wide assessment, if you will, had to do with the bonding and/or the grant potential. Wasn't there some connection there?
The grants that are out there, very few grants are for revitalization. They're for environmental projects. And, you can't get a better environmental project in my mind than protecting a lake. So you'll be rated high, which means that grants are inevitable. There's no promises there, but people want to do the right thing, and this is a good thing. This is a good thing.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ellen.
The only follow-up to that was just, I think it might be worth, I don't know where we came up with that exact ratio, but maybe that's something that can be evaluated, 25-75.
Right. Okay? One more question.
Just because the technical people
Right.
are here, and it's a question that always comes up with sewage treatment plants. What happens when there's an incident, a failure? It's a communal system, the water is still flowing. What happens?
The book that we designed to is that thick, and it's about mechanical reliability, it's about redundancy, safety systems. It's not quite a nuclear power plant, but it's pretty close. And everything everything is designed so that the plant will continue the process And, I mean, there's over 200 treatment plants in Suffolk County, and when, you know, really just Hurricane Sandy is an event that was never planned for, and those are when the treatment plants failed. So,
But what, I mean, it just, the water just keeps flowing, so.
no, there's generators, emergency generators, self-supplied fuel sources. There's redundant of everything, redundant pumps, redundant piping, redundant tanks. I mean, it's designed for that in mind.
So to the extent that it's possible, but you're not saying they never fail, I mean, you can't really say they never fail because.
No, you can never say that. I mean, an event like Sandy opened up a lot of people's eyes.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to make one comment about the plant. I had the opportunity to work at Southampton Hospital Sewage Treatment Plant, which is an old plant, and I had the opportunity to work at Southampton Rehab's plant. It's like night and day. You can walk around rehab and you don't even know there's a sewage treatment plant inside there. Even when you go inside the building, it's not that bad compared to Southampton Hospital. And let me tell you, it's no fun working on those plants.
So, okay, so this is going to be on the village website. We really encourage people to comment. We'll have further meetings about this. As I said, you know, this is at this point a proposal about how it might be paid for and what the boundaries could be. We'd like to get comments back and then make our recommendations to the trustees. So, as someone said, this is not just a study, but we can actually move this into a real project for the village, which I think as a legacy project for the village is incredibly important. So thank you. Okay, so that's the conclusion of the planning commission meeting. Thanks.